of everything.
Yeah, for those who don't know, this is the brother of the Labour leader, Piers Corbyn. He's a housing activist, long-standing socialist activist, and he's also uniquely known amongst left-wingers, peculiarly, as someone who disagrees with the dominant narrative on climate science. So he's an astrophysicist, a weather forecaster. He disagrees with the attitude that dominates the press about climate science. So plenty of controversy left in there. He's going to talk about his movement called Action for Life that he's launching to argue about climate science from an alternative perspective. So it's Piers Corbyn. Take the stage.
Hooray! Well, thank you very much, Haiku, for organising this. This is the first Speaker's Corner Action for Life event. And I'm here with other organisers of Action for Life. Alice Grant here, age 17. Her sister. Her mother is here somewhere, there. Jonathan Graham, the tall one. Jonathan, come over here. Jonathan. He's spreading awareness. Okay, there's more here as well. And I want to thank Haiku, as always, for fixing up these superb events. Now, as Haiku mentioned, I am the brother of Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, who we hope will be the next Prime Minister. However, I am speaking here in an entirely personal capacity. So any media, what I'm saying is what I'm saying. And my brother may or may not agree. The key message we have is that man-made climate change does not exist. It is a hoax. Climate policy controls you, not climate. It's used to manipulate the mob, the people, the crowd, the public into paying more taxes and be controlled in many ways by forces and the mega corporations behind what we call democracy. CO2 levels are an effect, not a cause of climate. Carbon dioxide levels follow climate, follow temperatures. They don't lead them. And that is shown on those graphs we've been handing out. Jonathan, here, can you fetch him? Look, give out the graphs, please. Right.
There's the man.
Recently, in a Canadian court, the main claim of the climate hoax story, namely that temperatures have been uniform, flat for thousands of years and suddenly increased, that claim, known as the hockey stick graph, has shown to be fraud. A court in Canada said it's fraud. The originator of that graph refused to explain to the court how he produced it, so the judge said, okay, we don't believe you, and he dismissed the libel case and so forth. That is now proven fraud. There should have been top news on the BBC and all the mainstream media. It was not mentioned at all. It was kept silent. Their whole basis for Extinction Rebellion and climate policy across the world is now destroyed. Yes. What is really happening is, as shown on that graph, the other graph there on the back, the lower one, is that there was a medieval warm period a long time ago, and what's happening now is we're past a sub-peak of warming and the world is now cooling and heading for a mini ice age. That is because of the reduced solar activity. Now, the main dangers to the world now are twofold. One is world cooling and therefore more ice in winter on the European coast, larger ice areas in the North Pole and South Pole, and crop failure. There'll be crop failure in Germany, crop failure in America, and there already is. There already is decreased production of wheat and maize. Last time that happened, a lot of Germans moved to Spain. That will happen again within the next 20 years. We are moving into a new mini ice age. And what we have though is a second main danger of the current climate situation is climate policy itself. Climate policy itself is a big danger. You see, the actual amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is only 0.04%. Mankind produces only 4% of 0.04%, which is like a bird dropping on the top of Big Ben Tower if Big Ben Tower was the atmosphere, symbolically. But that's 96%, but you see, natural CO2 is 25 times that. So if man is controlling the world, then it has to also control natural CO2, which means the termites have to follow man. Well, when you drive a car around Marble Arch, do you think the termites over underneath those trees are going to fart? I mean, that's what they've got to do if man is controlling CO2 and CO2 is controlling climate. What they're requiring is a conspiracy theory of nature. It is madness. Complete, total, anti-scientific madness, and the people that put it out should be removed from universities and stop preaching lies. However, what's happened is those who speak the truth have been getting expelled. Professor Pidd, University of Queensland, was expelled for speaking the truth that the coral reefs are doing fine. He was expelled and he was reinstated by a court, another court. It's a bit strange, we have to have courts to decide on science now. This is mad. It's insane, you're quite right. So, I'm going to be asked some questions soon by Alice in public questions. But what we're here for is to make Extinction Rebellion extinct. Extinction Rebellion is a death cult. Action for Life is a life force. We want real truth, not fake truth. And we want real green, not fake green. We need to do specific things, but before I go on to these, I think Alice wanted to ask me some questions. And if you ask, yeah, use them on the mic, and if you can't hear them, I will shout them out as well.
Okay, so Piers, the first question, what do you say about the theory that we're taught in school as if it's factual, that the greenhouse gases are effectively warming our planet and it's our fault, it's man-made CO2 that's being trapped in our atmosphere and causing global warming? Right,
what do we say to the theory they're taught in schools that man's CO2 is getting trapped in the atmosphere and trapping radiation? Well, I would say it is completely false and it should not be taught in schools. At the very least, they should teach both sides and have debate, because there's always room for a debate, but they do not allow debate. Now, what actually happens is man does produce carbon dioxide, but that carbon dioxide gets balanced out or gets absorbed into the sea. The amount of carbon dioxide in the air is controlled by the temperature of the sea. If you have a bottle of pop, you warm it up, CO2 comes off. You keep it cold and it can absorb CO2. So, as we're moving into, well, the medieval warm period, for example, the land was very warm and the surface of the sea was warm. It produced extra CO2 because there's 50 times more CO2 stored in the sea than in the air. A little warming then, more CO2 in the atmosphere, but then the Greenland melts a bit and that very cold water gets subducted under the ocean in the North Atlantic. That absorbs the CO2 produced, and hundreds of years later the ocean currents go under the sea, come out again in the Pacific and and the Indian Ocean, giving more CO2 now because of the medieval warm period. So the extra CO2 around now is due to the medieval warm period. Man's extra CO2 has no effect, and it will be all balanced out and just go back into the sea or absorbed by extra tree growth. So one of the demands we have, and we'll come to more of these in a minute, is we want to plant more trees. Because you see, the CO2 theory says there's too much CO2. Well, okay, if it is, just plant trees. Now, we know actually the more CO2 you grab, then it'll come out of the sea. But okay, I like trees, so to stop their argument, we say plant 1.2 trillion trees in the next 5 years. And that will negate all their stupid policies to stop you flying, eating meat.
And it only costs, it's been calculated by a Swiss university.
Yes?
It's been calculated by a Swiss university that the cost of planting 1.2 trillion trees that would suck up 66% of all the so-called carbon produced by man since 1890 will cost 240 billion pounds.
Right.
So total money is nothing compared with the mad schemes they've got for trillions to do things that are useless.
Spot on, Haiku. So that's the first demand. Plant 1.2 trillion trees. So, Alice,
So
next question.
My second question is, tell us about your experience of explaining the truth about global warming to big corporations such as ExxonMobil. How do they react? And expose
Right,
them.
what do big corporations think?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, big corporations know the truth. Secondly, what they do is designed to make money. For example, if you want to buy a house in Florida, which by the way, according to Extinction Rebellion, will all be flooded in 12 years' time, you want to buy a house in Florida, you can do that. The bank will lend you loads of money. They'll have your property as an asset. According to Extinction Rebellion, that'll be worth nothing in 12 years. But the bank will lend you a mortgage for 50 years. The banks know it's a pack of lies, otherwise they'd lend nothing. The oil companies know it's a pack of lies, because what they want to do is make more money by increasing energy prices. I was at a big conference in 2004 where ExxonMobil were there, loads of them were there, and they agreed with what I said about CO2 running the show, and they said to me they knew this, and they were glad to hear me. Some people asked them later, would they fund me? Because they agree with what I said, because they can make money from it. And they said, no, we don't want to fund Mr. Corbyn, we like his work, but we do not want to upset the green lobby. I repeat, this is what ExxonMobil said. We're not going to fund the truth because we don't want to upset the green lobby. The green lobby increases energy costs. That is how it works out. The OPEC is designed to reduce oil production to maintain energy prices. That is all part of the con before us. So, Alice, have you got another question?
Yes. So let's talk about Extinction Rebellion, how harmful they are to society, and what do you think about them, and why are they such a harmful force?
Extinction Rebellion is a death cult funded by George Soros and the mega corporations. They were set up for...
I think it's through one org.
The question is, what's Extinction Rebellion come from? Extinction Rebellion. Okay, they're funded by the super rich, specifically Rockefeller has been mentioned, George Soros has been mentioned in the background, and they came actively through Citizens Online, which is a corporate operation. It's got all the big 5G operators on it and big oil companies, such as ExxonMobil again.
What about the Rothschilds?
Pass.
I heard you mention the Rothschilds.
I didn't mention the
One of
Rothschilds.
the Rothschilds is heavily involved in supporting.
Yeah.
One of the Rothschilds is heavily involved in supporting the green climate lobby. I can look up the data and pass you the information. You can check it all on wrongkindofgreen.org, which is a website which is run by people who are critical. Both they believe actually the arguments that Piers is disagreeing with, the scientific arguments, but they believe that actually, despite that, the green movement, and particularly Extinction Rebellion, is part of a campaign by corporate capitalism to manipulate the mood of the youth towards supporting an agenda of the fourth industrial revolution, Internet of Things and 5G and so on and so forth. A giant industrial investment program.
Okay, our next question, and then I'm going to bring the jet stream over here. Someone will have to carry the world over to here. Next
So,
question, Alice.
final question, Piers.
Yeah, you bring it. And the jet stream that right behind it. Alice, please speak.
So, Piers, what are the biggest environmental issues facing our planet, and how should we tackle them? Because obviously climate change is a hoax, and it's being used at the moment to divert our attention from the real problems the Earth is facing, and which are obviously not in the interest of global corporatism. So, Piers, what are they?
Right, the biggest pollution problems facing the planet are diesel pollution in cities, smoke pollution from open fires in Africa and China. We do not have a problem of world warming, we have a problem of world cooling. We also have a problem of plastic. Well, the plastic itself is not a problem, it's the failure to dispose of plastic is a problem. And the answer to that is litter, and it should be burnt.
What should we be planting in the Northern Hemisphere? What should we be planting in the Northern Hemisphere to be robust against a new ice age? And it's not good enough just to say trees, because we do need to eat.
Right.
Sorry,
so he's asking-
just one point. The study that was done by the Swiss scientists located the areas where now could be used for planting 1.2 trillion trees. They got the number from calculating lands that are not used for agricultural production. So it's not going to affect agricultural production at all to do that.
But if we are entering a new ice age, the crops that we do have in monoculture are not going to be robust to that. And so what I'm asking is, what should we be planting? Are we talking about trees like sloes? Our ancestors used to eat a lot of sloes. What are we going to be eating in this country?
What sort of speed are you talking about in terms of cooling process?
Well, the rate of cooling is going to increase rapidly this year. We're going to have snow and ice in Britain, most parts of Britain, in parts of October, parts of November, parts of December, and also into the early January, where there'll be hyper cold in Western Europe.
What if it's not?
What if
it's not? You're a weather forecaster,
Yeah,
you
what
know
if it's
that.
not? We're 85% confident of this. If the jet stream goes to somewhere else, it will be cold somewhere else. We'll discuss the jet stream in a minute. Oh, here we have it. All right, we'll do this now. You mind holding it? Someone bring me the jet stream.
Sorry, where?
I can't hold both, I'm afraid.
No, you can't.
Yeah, my question is in relation to the story of
Bring
the
me that
Amazon
pipe there.
rainforest and it's burning. You can't hear me. 1 second.
Amazon rainforest burning.
Yeah.
Did you see the NASA report on that?
I did. Well,
so
the Amazon rainforest.
I ain't finished question yet. I want to know how it factors into everything that you're speaking about, especially if we've got to plant 100 million trees in the next 5 years. Well, yeah, 1.2 trillion. One, if you think the Amazon burning is a real fake thing, and two, would it be part of the globalist scheme if it is burning to contribute to this whole green agenda that you're talking about?
Yes. What about the burning of the Amazon forest? Well, first of all, these fires are nothing to do with climate. They're lit by humans to clear space for animals to graze. The fires in Angola are bigger, but they're talking about these purely as propaganda to get children on the streets.
Yeah, but there was a study by NASA which
Yes.
reveals that the fires in the Amazon this year, and it was published on the BBC, are no more than any time in the last 20 years.
That's right.
And then there was another study, fact-checked BBC again, that showed the worldwide fire rate in forests is less than over the last 20 years. So it's a fake story.
NASA. Can NASA be trusted on
Okay.
Well, yes, they've got satellite data on
Can
satellite
we go
data.
back to the jet
That's what I
stream?
was asking.
But that's a very good question, and I thank you for adding more information. Haiku, is this still all right? It got knocked there.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. This is a symbol of the jet stream. And here we have a model who's holding it for us, or an assistant of the model, whatever. Anyway,
You flatter me.
okay. It's fast air going around the northern regions, and when it points downwards, we can have cold air going down, and going upwards, it can be warm air going upwards. Now, I'm simplifying it because it's difficult to show here, but the question was asked, if it doesn't snow here, when I'm saying it will, what will happen? The answer is it will snow somewhere else. But there will be some extreme cold in later parts of this year and the start of next year in the northern hemisphere. So, all right, a question, and then after your question, I'll go into the demands we need.
About what crops
Oh, the crops. Yes.
in the northern hemisphere.
Okay. What crops are we going to need as we move into the little ice age? Well, in temperate zones like here, wheat will fail in the north of England, so they better plant turnips instead. In general terms, there'll have to be a lot more polytunnels. Already in Scotland, a lot of farmers use polytunnels, which of course, 100 years ago, these things will be very expensive. Big glass greenhouses get broken. Polytunnels, easy to build. And that will be a big factor between the next 5 and 30 years. We'll have to have more.
What about the promotion of permaculture systems that are shown to be more robust in different diverse climatic conditions like drought and flooding?
Yeah, well, anything should be tried. The point is we've got to be imaginative. Permaculture, good idea, where it can be done. But there will be alternative crops which are more resistant to cold and the decreased growing season which is going to be before us. So now, I'm going to put forward the key demands we want.
May I ask a question?
All right, question.
Okay, sorry. I've been talking with the ladies that came with you today, and there was an interesting question I would like to ask you. It's I was told that there was a period of greater heat during the Middle Ages,
Yes.
when the Earth was, the atmosphere was hotter than it is now, correct?
Yes.
So, yeah, after that, definitely there was must have been a cooling period,
Yes.
because the Earth got cooler. Okay, so when did the period when the Earth started getting hotter again start? How long ago did it start? Did the Earth start getting hotter and hotter again until we came, to what we have
Okay.
nowadays? When did that period?
He's asking about climate cycles. The medieval warm period was in medieval times, peak around 900 AD or so, 1000 AD. It was a long period. It was cooling down later and then started warming again this century, basically. And the smoothed out peak of temperatures, during the last century, I would say, because there was a mini ice age in the late 1600s and 1700s, and then the Dalton minimum in the Napoleonic Wars, early 1800s. After that, we've had warming, and it's probably reached a peak, actually, if you smooth things out, around the 1930s and 40s. There's sub-peaks separated by 60 years. This one has ended around 2000, 2005, and we're now in a cooling period, as is shown by the thermosphere. Above the stratosphere is getting colder and colder, and winter ice extent in the northern hemisphere is getting bigger, and average temperatures are going down, despite what the BBC tells you.
So are you saying that land measurements are by definition inaccurate?
Land measurements are not very good, but if they're carefully kept in places where they don't alter the environment of trees or whatever, they can be good. However, the BBC is now using places in cities which have suffered urban heat effects, and then they're claiming these are records, like in Cambridge. In Cambridge, that record of 38.6 was actually just to do with urban heating, because a few miles away at the outskirts of Cambridge, in the countryside, the peak on that day was only 36.1. So it's fake news.
So during the Napoleonic Wars is when the period of heating up again started. This period of heat.
Well,
correct?
after the Napoleonic Wars.
Oh, a bit after that.
Yeah, about 1850s.
Okay.
The beginning of the Victorian era. Rule Britannia and all that. Britannia rules the ways.
Britons never
Shall be slaves. Okay.
It's from Ukraine, mate.
Well,
I've got you singing that shit.
I live in
already.
Britain, mate. I'm
you singing
British
that
now.
shit.
he's British now. Okay. Okay, the demands, what we want. 1, plant trees to remove man's CO2. Plant 1.2 trillion years within the next, plant 1.2 trillion trees within the next 5 years. Demand 2, support the electrification of Africa. Build coal-fired power stations in Africa so that the women who die 1 million a year from cooking on open fires don't have to do that anymore. Instead, they can have electric heating and cooking that will save 1 million lives a year. And that could be funded by the European Union and the International Monetary Fund.
So who's going to fund this planting 1.2 trillion? Who's going to fund that? I mean, there's absolutely no sign that anyone on earth, any government are going to plant those trees.
Well, they're already doing it.
Okay,
I mean, Haiku.
Ethiopia planted 360 million trees in 12 hours in July this year. 360 million.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but 360 million is only 2,000 times that.
Well, 2,000 times that.
It's a tiny
Well, 2,000. Well, I mean,
The tree planting can be done.
I certainly agree that should be done. But can you explain to me then, if we're in a period of global cooling, you say now, why is it that the ice caps are melting at an enormous speed? And I'm sorry, but what you're saying now is simply not based on science. It's not based on scientific fact. It's based on something
it is.
something you
what
believe.
I'm saying is entirely based on scientific fact.
Which facts? I mean, you've got this globe here, and you've got things going around this globe. But what facts are these? How do you explain the global cooling that's going on? The global warming that's going on across the planet, and that is scientific fact, not fiction. Fact. Well,
look, we've dealt with that already. The world is cooling because of low solar activity. If you look at that graph on the bottom, where it's been warming, those also correspond to periods of high solar activity. We're now in a period of low solar activity causing the cooling. And the ice caps are actually increasing now.
Mr. Speaker, can I ask you, scientists after scientists, the majority of scientists in the world say this Earth is warming up. We're in a period of global warming, which can have a devastating effect. You mentioned Ethiopia, Mali, for example, going through a severe drought at the moment. What's going to happen to those people, those children? So how do you account for this so-called global cooling? There's no global cooling. There's drought across the world now.
In essence, the issue is because there is a guy, for example, Lindsay, I think his name is.
Richard Lindsay.
He's a climber. He was on the IPCC. The guy who talks very quiet and calm and like that. You're at his lecture in
Richard Lindsay.
That's it.
Friend of mine.
So he says that there is a warming. It's a minor, it's less than they claim, but there is some degree of warming. Yeah. He says it's not that significant. The gentleman here is saying there is warming, but it's causing a number of catastrophic events around the world. Are the two things automatically connected together? So you could be wrong about the warming, but without concluding that there's leading to disasters around the world.
There has been warming up to about 5 years ago. Now we have cooling. And of course, depending where you smooth things out, Richard Lindsay can be right or wrong. It just depends on the timescale you choose. But there is now cooling, and this year, the extent as measured by NASA and NOAA of the Arctic, the ice, the snow extent in the Northern Hemisphere was higher than any time in the last 50 years. And that means next year will also be colder. So it will be increased even more next year. We're getting into a feedback cycle of rapid cooling. There has been warming, yes, but we're now in cooling. Now I want to go on to our other demands.
He was asking also about weather events around the world. So, for example, droughts.
Okay.
We had fires earlier on. When there are tornadoes, hurricanes, a lot of people are believing that these events are the product of a process of warming. So is that just nonsense? And if so, why is it nonsense?
Yes. Well, the claims are there's more of these hurricanes. Facts is there's less hurricanes now. We've had a decrease in hurricanes over the last 30 years. That is NOAA and NASA fact. The BBC propagate every event as if it's caused by mankind. It is nonsense, propaganda, fake news, and actually a pack of lies. The reality is that all their so-called predictions failed. They said we'd have the end of snow, we've had more snow. They said we'd have more hurricanes, we've had less hurricanes. They said we'd have runaway warming, we have not had runaway warming. Now we have cooling.
Hang on, one minute. In the last couple of years, there were a couple of weather events in Britain, right? Just example. One was called Beast from the East, right? Remember that? And then the other was this year, right? And then the other was this year. They said hottest ever, and I think it was one day. The rest of it was a shitty summer. Let's face it. It wasn't a fantastically warm summer. So which do you remember more? Which is more significant?
You can't take one example like that. No. What I am saying, on a global scale, there's definitely the ice sheet is definitely.
No, it's not. That is untrue.
Why is it untrue? It's not untrue.
Well, the measurements show it's untrue.
But
The actual NASA reports show there's more ice in the Antarctic.
Are you
The maps
prepared
show,
on the YouTube
yes,
video? Hang on. Are
Absolutely.
you prepared on the YouTube video to check the data, both of you, and present the evidence, one or two citations? There'll be a YouTube video going
Absolutely.
online. Both of you can present your evidence, and if either of you are wrong, you're prepared to accept you're wrong, yeah?
Absolutely. The ice coverage figures in the Arctic come from NASA.
I will, and I do check.
They come from NASA, but they're not publicised by the BBC.
I have to say to you, I am like this gentleman here. I was also very sceptical as well until perhaps a few years ago. But now the evidence is overwhelming now. Overwhelming.
Told the evidence is overwhelming.
The propaganda
you're not a
is
scientist
bigger
yourself,
than it's ever
researching
been.
I am a scientist, actually.
Can we
In
move
what
on?
field? Well, but that's not the same field.
Sorry, what was your question again?
It's not meteorology.
Glaciers.
Model making.
Haiku, can we go to glaciers?
Numbers do
Okay,
really
but
count.
I think it's fair
Yeah,
to say
we can do something.
that you should
we
both
will.
present on that
We will.
particular question the scale of ice. That's a verifiable argument.
Yes, our data comes satellite measurements from NASA.
What we see?
That's what we're using.
We'll see.
Okay, we'll see.
How else can we do?
We will see. Haiku's right, we'll see. Now, I've been asked about glaciers. The biggest, most significant glacier in the world, the Jakobshavn Glacier in Greenland, is now growing longer. And it has been doing that for the last couple of years.
What about the one in Iceland? They gave
I
a lot
don't
of
know,
reports about
I don't know, but the idea that all glaciers are getting shorter is untrue. We're now in a period where more and more of them are getting longer. The Jakobshavn Glacier,
You mentioned Iceland. That's happened. I was in Iceland about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And there's no doubt that the glaciers are getting shorter. There's no doubt about that. They're
Well,
receding at an enormous rate of
you can always do cherry picking and find a glacier, but I'm telling you about the most important glacier in the world.
Iceland is heavily populated, isn't it? So there'll be a lot of reporting about
Would it be a bad thing if all the ice in the world disappeared?
Would it be a bad thing? No, I don't think it'd be a bad thing.
Well, I mean, once upon a time,
Are you
Greenland.
actually- are you
Once upon a
saying-
time, there were camels in Greenland.
Yeah.
Right?
And why is it called Greenland? Why is it called Greenland?
It was warm.
when the Vikings
It was green when the Vikings went there. That's right. Okay, next demand then. So we want to support the electrification of Africa, so you don't have 1 million African women dying a day. Next one is
Who's going to do that? Sorry.
we want to stop.
Who's going to pay for it?
do that? There's absolutely no
Look, they want to spend trillions on stupid.
Can I go back to Mali next week and reassure that the families who are struggling to keep their kids because there's a serious drought going on at the
Well,
moment? Can I reassure them they have nothing to worry about at all?
The World
Just wait
Economic
another
Forum-
500 years and everything will be fine.
The World Economic Forum want to spend trillions on all sorts of mad schemes, such as more and more more and more wind turbines. We say end wind turbines and spend that money on electrification of Africa for coal-fired power stations.
Rocket stoves. Wouldn't it be far better to use rocket stoves which burn off the secondary gases that actually affect people's health? I mean, far better that than the big infrastructural projects, no?
Well, a lot of people need electricity in Africa anyway.
If you use rocket stoves, which is a well-known technology that ESSO helped fund, because I've got a friend who was in the think tank for it, you create these stoves which are vented and they have a secondary burn-off and they burn clean so that the fumes don't go into the family's lungs.
He's talking about other technologies such as rocket stoves. Well, maybe, but I think you see, like all of those things involving burning oil, when they're not looked after, you get diesel-type fumes, which are bad.
It's burning wood, and if you're going to plant a lot more trees, then they'll be readily available naturally.
Well, not until the trees have grown. Okay, but the electrification of Africa would be a massive boost to that. You can have other things in more remote areas, I agree. But, you know, practical, we don't want to have these people dying from the wood smoke and dung smoke pollution.
Did you see the story, this one on the BBC website, 13th of September? It says, climate change, electrical industry's dirty secret boosts warming. And then it says the most powerful greenhouse gas known to humanity and emissions has been rising recently. The BBC has learned. Sulfur hexafluoride, or SF6, is widely used in electrical industry to prevent short circuits. This little known gas has been leaking in Europe, in the EU, for example, in 2017, to the equivalent of producing 1.3 million cars on the road. And it then says, levels are rising as an unintended consequence of the green energy boom.
Well, it's hilarious, but you see...
You must answer that question. No, that's a very important. That's a very important. So, do you deny that article then? Do you deny that?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that green technology, wind farms, are producing a greenhouse gas 1,000 times more powerful than CO2, and it remains in the 23,500 times more warming than carbon dioxide, and it hangs in the atmosphere for 1,000 years.
Wind farms.
Wind farms.
Well, that's very new. Well, then I accept.
Well, look,
I accept
the greenhouse theory anyway is against the first and second laws of thermodynamics. And if you go on our website and read our expositions and the document at the University of Reading Debating Society, the QR code is on here about that. Read that, and explains that the greenhouse theory is incorrect anyway. So although the Green Lobby are producing this sulfur hexafluoride, which is a very strong greenhouse gas, I would say it may be harmful to health too, but it's irrelevant so far as climate is concerned.
Sorry, Piers, I wanted
to
just ask you one quick question. I think we're not all aware of how the actions of people can shift the environment, not the climate itself, but the environment. Like, the best example of that is the Five Plagues policy in Mao of China, when he messed up the environment, and then they had to import sparrows because they killed all of them, and the environment was messed up. My question is this: if you plant all those trees, and if you reduce the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere to that extent, are we certain that there will be absolutely no consequences on the environment, no unforeseen consequences, no bad consequences?
Well,
we
know
what's going to happen?
What would be the unintended consequences of planting a lot more trees? Well, the answer is I don't know, but you should do surveys. And as Haiku has pointed out, you could just chop the trees down again anyway.
So just one little addendum.
Yeah.
The NASA report that I referred to earlier on, another NASA report, terribly sorry.
Yes.
There's a NASA report that shows that in the last 20 years, contrary to what you'd expect, India and China, the two biggest increasing releases of CO2, have had the biggest increase in foliage on the Earth. They've had an increase in 20 years equivalent to the size of the entire Amazon rainforest. That's
Fantastic.
largely probably because, I speculate, probably because they release so much CO2
That's right.
that all the plants are growing
They
much
do.
faster.
More CO2 makes more trees. CO2 is the gas of life. These trees need it. Now I'll just finish our demands and then Alice is going to have a few words. Alice, are you listening? You're going to be on soon.
She's away.
Okay.
She's been
Oh, she's here now.
chatting to
You're going to be on soon. So, all right, we end wind farms. We should switch the Drax power station from burning trees back to coal. We've got to reduce energy prices, end the subsidies on stupid green policies. We want real green, not fake green. We want to stop 5G, which is dangerous. It's got a lot of questions about 5G. It should be tested before it goes out. But it's also put around as part of a green policy to put smart meters in your homes. The smart meters aren't doing anything useful to you. They're spying on you. And the radiation, I believe, is dangerous. A lot of people may have questions about it, but it's got to be tested. So we say stop the rollout of 5G. And to end,
tested, actually.
well,
It's already being tested because the whole of Shanghai is full of 5G.
well,
So you'll
okay.
know in a few years' time.
Well,
what
if they die, yeah, okay.
Well, you
Well,
Well, the army already know that it has negative impacts.
yeah, but it's not ubiquitous everywhere. That's just army bases and so on.
all right, well, stop the rollout of 5G. It's another fake green policy anyway, but, you know, there has to be more tests done, whatever. The last point I would make is make Extinction Rebellion, Death Cult extinct and advance with Action for Life.
Thank you very much, Piers.
So, Alice, do you want to say a few words? Or is that the end?
Basically,
Yeah, you need a mic.
There goes the jet stream.
You could stand here if you want.
no worries. You know, my generation have been completely brainwashed into believing this climate change scam.
You should
But,
be here. Come up here, it'd be better. Come on.
No, I'm fine.
All right.
But basically, I'm so grateful to Pierce for opening my eyes to the truth. Because CO2 is the gas of life, it supports life, it's extremely important to our Earth and for our survival. So this demonisation of CO2 has just comes from the government, from the EU, from these global corporatism, because they want more control over us, and they want to extort taxpayers' money, you know, to line their pockets.
So what would you say to the school kids going out on strike for perfectly legitimate feelings, if you like?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I'd say do your research, because you know we're told climate change like it's a religion, like it's you know, a fact, but science is never settled. So there must always be debate, and it's really worrying that we are that you know dissent is being silenced, or if you don't agree, you're labelled a climate change denier. And don't forget to follow Action for Life _ Twitter.
Hooray! So do we end there, Heiko? Okay, forward with Action for Life. Thank you.
Okay, now you have to grab this and kiss the planet.
Oh,
for
kiss the
marketing,
planet.
For marketing purposes.
Thanks very much,
guys.
citizen. Hooray! Well done. That was brilliant, Alice. Fantastic.
Come take over everything from your belly.
Come, man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to ITV.
Where the act upon here? Where the act upon here? No, it's not about acting upon it, because why? The Jews in this country. When it comes down to no. Wait. Look how they scare the Jews. Would you kick out the Jews?
Man, don't listen to BBC.
I'll show you. I didn't ask you that. Would you kick out the Jews?